Hello, everyone. I hope you are having a great day, and I thank you for coming and taking your time to listen to this presentation and workshop. So, Grant and I are doing a workshop on using Rmarkdown for reproducible research and for organizing class notes. So, they kind of go hand in hand, surprisingly enough, with how we can do that in R, which is really nice. And so it allows us. He and I have just been working with R for a long time, and we've developed these different like workflows and methods for trying to stay organized through working on various projects, and for trying to help stay organized when trying to teach others about using R. And we found that using Rmarkdown and some of the various packages and tools through R in RStudio is a very nice and clean way of doing it so that it is easy for others to kind of see what we were doing and what our kind of mindset was for doing it. And so today's going to actually be a pretty laid back and pretty simple presentation. The actual like PowerPoint part of this presentation is going to be very short and very small. It's just going to be very limited in what we do so that we can actually get into using R in RStudio and showing how to get these things up and running. So uh, in this presentation, I'm just going to give some very brief links to how to do stuff, and we're going to dive into our Markdown and some of the various examples that we did. So again, it's just going to be a very laid back workshop on how to kind of get these things up and running on your computer. So here are some of the links that we're going to go to for R, and then we'll use Rmarkdown primarily, and then we'll go to some of these examples here in a bit. So first, let's just go ahead and dive right into R. Take out some of these. So R. So like just going straight into R, we can Google download R and it'll work the same way. We're just going to go to download. So these crayon mirrors, we don't really need to worry about them here. They're really just a housing for where the actual code is. So you'll notice that all of the names down here are different countries. I always just scroll down to the good old US of A, and I generally pick Dallas because it's just closest to Waco. It doesn't really matter where you pick, just as long as you pick somewhere. And then because I am using a Windows, I will be downloading a Windows version of R. And you can download a Mac version, and there's no appreciable differences. So download. It generally takes a couple seconds to get on your computer, which is always fun when doing workshops and presentations and waiting for computers to download what you need. It's getting there. It's getting there. Oh, finally it's going down instead of up. That's good. That's a good sign for the clock down there. Okay. So then yes, we do want to open it up. And generally through all this setup, what we want to do is we just want to click yes and OK through all the settings. So yes, I do actually want to download it. Yes, it's fine, just download it to the folder. Yes. Yes. I'll just use the defaults. And again, just the fun of waiting for things to install. So I won't actually go into the actual base R because it's kind of painful to use and work on. It's what I first learned R on, and I wouldn't really wish that on anyone. So we're just going to go straight into download RStudio. Okay. And so they're a very nice website. We want to get the free version of RStudio. So one of the really nice parts about RStudio and their company is that they make things very user-friendly for the most part, and depending on your system, it will automatically detect what it is. So because I am on a Windows, it'll just automatically detect that I need the Windows version. But if you're on a Mac, it will automatically detect that you need the Mac version. So you download it. This generally is pretty quick, which is nice. Open it up. More signing your life away. You're not actually signing your life away. It's just a lot of the fun setting and warning messages. Yep, I just want to install it. Yep. And it will go here and eventually, because this stuff is slow. Okay, so now that that's finally finished, let's dive right in. So I'm gonna get out of this presentation and we are going to start up RStudio. So I'm just going to search down here. Let's just search here for RStudio. You might need to search in your Finder or Files under Applications, and it will pop up eventually. So like in R, you'll notice that there will be 3, possibly 4 windows that initially pop up. The fourth one being this blank, what is called a script tab. So this is where we do our editing for different files and different documents that we want to edit on. So this is really just a fancy calculator. So is R. So this pane up here, which is like the editor, and this pane down here, which is called the console, these two pieces are connected. So like if I type something down here, let's say 4 plus 4, and I highlight everything, I can run it, and it will run down in the console. So there I have this, just a simple addition right here. So the next big piece is this environment window. So this environment window is very, very helpful because it lets us kind of have a visual of what things are in R's memory. So, for example, if I want to use the object X to store the addition and operation of 4 plus 4, I can do that, and it will show me the value over here. So this becomes really useful when using multiple data sets and using lots of different objects in the same analysis. And so then I can actually call that value later, and it will give me return that value that is stored there. And so that becomes really useful for doing more complicated analyses in R. But generally, this window up here is very useful for just general high-level information. Another really great tab is that we can actually just import a data set through a GUI interface, and we can save the entire workspace as well. So save everything that R has in its memory. We can come back to it later if we need to. One of the other cool things that is in some of the new version of RStudio is this tutorial tab, where it will allow you to kind of it is a nice introduction to the basics of using R in RStudio, which I highly recommend if you're semi-new to using R or RStudio, or like just a nice refresher on how other people think or other people like to introduce R to others, which is something I found really useful after years of doing it my own way. I was like, oh, this is how other people do it, and I find it very, very beneficial to hear it from someone else as well. So the last major piece is this box down here. So this is where a lot of the external or output is generated. So this first piece is just a files tab, and this is actually the files on your computer. So for example, where is my desktop? Nope. It is in my documents folder, I believe. Yep, and so I can like go into any of these different types of files as well, like on GitHub. Like we'll get to that one in a minute, but there's different types of plots as well. You can open them up in there. So the next big piece is that there's this plots tab, and that's very useful for seeing output for different plots. This package window is very useful for seeing which packages you have installed. Because I've installed R previously, I'll have many more packages than you do down here. So then there's a nice help window. So like if there's a topic that you want to know more about, it's like I want to know more about how the mean works. So I type in mean, and it takes me to the mean help page. It's a very nice and very nifty way of trying to get started on different pieces and seeing what options they have. This becomes really useful when you start using multiple packages that might have the same name as well. And then there's this viewer tab, which is going to be very useful in our use of Markdown and different types of file compilers. Okay. So what we want to do now is we want to get started with our Markdown. So I don't need this page. I'm just going to exit out of that. So what we need is we need to install our Markdown. So it's R Markdown. Generally there'll be a little downplay window of which packages, if that package actually exists. So then we just want to make sure this install dependencies is on. So when this downloads for me, it won't really install any dependencies because I already have them. But generally, when you're first installing, it'll be a very long list of dependencies. Okay. So then the next thing we want is there is this other package called Tiny Tech, TEX. So this package is basically a small version of a LaTeX file, a LaTeX editor for us to use. And so what this is it's something that R will use when making different type of PDF files from Markdown files, which is very, very useful. So now let's dive in to a Markdown file. So to get to a new file, we're going to just click this little new file button, and we'll get a nice little list. And let's click our Markdown. So we can just give it a title, and then our name, and then it'll give us some basic information that we can choose from. So I'm going to call this the super awesome amazing file about stuff. And so you'll notice that it automatically put in my name, and it will give us an option of what type of output file we want, whether we want a PDF file or whether we want to turn it into a Word file. So by default it'll turn it into an HTML file, and you can move all these windows around, which is really useful. And so there are kind of these three or four major pieces of a Markdown file. So you'll notice this first piece up here. It is separated by 3 dashes above and below. This is what R recognizes as what is like the metadata or the information that we'll use to how it's going to output the file, or what it's going to title and what your name is or the date. So it automatically put in my super awesome amazing file about stuff title, which is great, and it did already make sure it's an HTML file. The next piece is on lines 8, 9, and 10. So you'll notice it's a little dash, or a little hyphen, I think is what it's called. It is the button or the key that is directly under the escape key or above the tab key, and we do that 3 times along with the bracket. So this is what this section right here is just like the settings and what we're going to name this chunk of our code. So this first piece tells it that, hey, we want to use R. We want to give it a name. In this case, we gave it the name setup. And it has this option called include. So what this means is when it's set to false is that it will not include the R chunk in the script. And so it also has many other options we can use as well. So the next big piece is how it comes up with different headings. So whenever we use the number, pound, hashtag sign, whatever we want to call it, the number of those gives us the size. The lower the numbers, the bigger the size. So like if we added 2 or 3, or 3 or 4 of the number signs, we would get a smaller heading up here. So because it is knits to an HTML file, what it does is it uses HTML code and formatting, or basic markdown to determine how it's going to format like different hyperlinks, or whether it's going to do bold, which is what 2 stars are, versus like italicize, which is just 1 star. Here's another chunk, which is a summary file, and it lets us know basically what do we want to do. And the nice thing is when we're working on these files is we can actually run this as is. So we can either highlight it and press run. It'll give us the information down there. Or if we go down over here, we can click the run the entire chunk, and it'll give us the output again. Another option is that we can click the button right next to it, and it will run all the chunks above the one that we have highlighted. And that becomes useful when you have a little bit longer file and you want to run everything above it so you can make sure everything works up till that point. Then you can include plots as well. So let's knit this and see what it looks like. Oh, forgot to name it. Example Rmarkdown. And so it will generate this little HTML file for us. So you'll notice that the very first thing after the date is the Rmarkdown, which is the heading on line 12 over here. And you'll notice that as I mentioned, that this chunk of code right here is not seen because we said we're not going to include it. And then again, it's just the output and the figure. So very basic, nothing too complicated, nothing too fancy. And that is the basic of a Markdown file. So some really useful settings about using figures in our Markdown is we don't want to use the fig settings to change the height and width and stuff. I found that using the output information provides a better control of the size of the figure. So you can do it through use of like pixels, or you can do it in terms of percentage of the width of the document or height of the document. So if I want it to be like 10%, what'll now is I'll make the figure very, very small relative to the size that it originally was. So you'll notice down here it's really, really small. So it might not be very useful to keep it that small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to blow this up to be basically 5 times as big as it usually or is originally was. And you'll notice that it's much, much bigger now. Okay. So that becomes a really useful way of managing the size of figures and outputs when you get to using more complicated files and figures. Okay, so now that is the very basic part of a Markdown file. So, and the last thing about a basic Markdown file is there's this little button over here called Publish. So now this is something that's really useful if you want to quickly publish a document as like online through like RStudio itself. And so what it'll tell you is you want to do it through RStudio Connect or RPubs, and it's really all of these are free from my understanding. I have not used either yet. I use GitHub mostly, and that is definitely free. Okay. So that is the basics of a Markdown file. So the next major useful piece of using R in RStudio is this Projects tab. Our projects are, and RStudio projects are possibly the most useful part of using RStudio, is because it allows you to create a single place where a single or different projects live, so that you can keep all the code and all of the information associated with that project together, whether that be the actual manuscript, all the different source files, all the different materials associated with the project. You can give it a project directory so that all that information can be pulled up through R very quickly and with all the settings about that project preloaded for you. So that's really useful. So if we just want like a basic file, what we're going to do is first project. And so you can actually automatically make a different GitHub repository or use different types of management tools as well of the versioning of our packages. So what it does is it just opens my project, opens it up to a blank R script, and you'll notice that there's really nothing in my project besides this single file. And it gives us a nice layout of where that file is. So there's nothing too complicated yet. So what we want to do next is start to build out our tools for using R and RStudio. One of the tools that I found to be very, very useful is using a package called Workflow R. It's called Workflow R. So what this package is it is a very useful way of developing basic websites for research. That workflow, yeah, a very basic website to organize research so that it's easy to collaborate and show for other people. So what we're going to do is, now that I have workflow installed on my computer and my R, I'm going to actually make a new project. So a new directory, I'm going to scroll down to Workflow R project. And I'm going to call this first workflow R. And again, I want it to be a subdirectory of the workshop folder I've been working on. And I can basically say I want to use GitHub, and it'll automatically generate that for me if I ask it to. So what it does, it's going to think for a second, and it'll generate a bunch of files for me. So the nice part about just having it automatically generate this information is we don't have to do it now. So what we have here is we have a README file, which gives a very basic introduction to what the project is. It has an indexed file, and this is the file that's really important for understanding for the homepage of the website. It gives it the very first page that everyone sees and helps you navigate towards different pages from that. Then we have these two other files that are .yml, and these are just a lot of settings files to understand what the output and workflow, what the output kind of looks like. So we don't really need those. So what we're going to do is the most important part about this is that there are these different folders that are automatically generated for us as well. So we have this analysis folder, code, data, docs, and output. Anything in the analysis folder is what R uses to make the website. Anything in the code folder is what R knows, hey, I'm not going to run it unless you ask me to. And that's very useful for running like data cleaning files. Then you have a data folder to just store all your data. This docs folder is actually what is used to hold all of the information about the website, like all the HTML files that are generated for the website. And then we have this extra output folder for any additional output that we want to use. So we're going to make a new, very basic Markdown page. Just basic analysis. And we're going to make sure to save it in the analysis folder as basic analysis. Okay, and you'll see that it popped up over here as well. So now what we need to do is we need to go back to the index folder, index file, and we need to make a link to it. So we can just go bracket basic analysis link, then parentheses basic analysis. Instead of a .rmd file, it's going to be a .html file. So we're going to save it. And now what we need to do is we need to build the website. So we build it by typing in workflow R : build. Let's see how many errors we get. So you'll see that it's building 4 separate files. It'll do some stuff on the right, and it will end up making our website for us. Okay, so you'll see that the title of the website, First Workflow, is over on the left-hand side, and we can go into the basic analysis script. And you'll notice that this is very similar, and by similar I mean identical, to the basic Markdown file we made initially. Then it has these other tabs as well, like a license where you can put like an abstract or a general description of the project. Then there's a license tab where you can put what type of license you want your project to fall under, whether it's like an MIT or Creative Commons license or whatever other one you are interested in. So that is the basic use of a workflow R project. So now these can get kind of big pretty quickly. So I'll show you what a couple that I have made. So I made in a project that I presented at CIRA last year, I'm about multi-level CFA models and parameter recovery. So I want to, instead of build the workflow, I want to go all the way down to just view it because I've already made it. So what it should do is it should open up a new tab over on the left. It's the name of my project, along with a description of some of the general ideas that I want to, and then it has some basics about the analysis. So like here's where I was looking at just basic convergence of my method, and it has a very broad overview of like what I did, how I checked it, summary of the estimation. One of the very nice parts about this is if I have it over here on the left, is I get a little table of contents, and I can click on where I want to go down to the page. So like because this is such a big file, there's so many different places for it to go to. And one of the nice parts is I can actually set it up to output files for like the manuscript. And because I use LaTeX, and a LaTeX file is a LaTeX version as well, so that's automatically generated for me. So these are really nice way of looking at how a lot of different pieces of the project that may not have been able to fit into the final manuscript, even though they are components that I looked at. So like in a paper that I published, I referenced one of my workflows like this as a way of supplemental material for the project. Like if I go to my GitHub account, I'll show you. So one of the projects that I did was the one that I published was a fit paper about multi-level CFA models. And so here is the results of that study. They're all here. They're all version controlled for other people to see. I can show them the different fit index, and the nice part is you can actually make it interactive as well. So I made an interactive piece with the website so that once it eventually loads, it will show the different pieces of the workflow. Let's hope it works. Are you going to work for me? Huh. Maybe it's not going to work. That's sad. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Yes. So I made it so that it will basically make different box plots depending on what inputs you give it. So like if I want to look at RMSEA, it will do that. And so that's one of the cool parts about the workflow is that workflow R project is you can add these components into it so that other people can utilize your data and code for other uses as well. And you can subset to all these different things. So that's what's really useful about workflow R is that there's so many additional pieces that you can add into it to make it interactive, to make it useful for potentially other people to glean insights into the work you've done. And that's what I really like about it, is it allows for transparency in what you did. So now that's workflow R. That's really useful for the organizing research part and staying reproducible with it, because it's all compiled at the same time. It automatically is reproducible because it's version controlled and lets other people see exactly what happened when it compiled. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to close out this project, and we're going to do the next piece, which is looking at how we organize different class notes and information, such as more linearly described data that might be a little bit longer or more reusable over time. So I'm going to use, I found something called bookdown. If I can spell down, bookdown is a very, very powerful package that allows us to really make a book within R, which is extremely powerful. And again, we're not going to use bookdown directly. We're going to make a project using bookdown. So again, make a new directory. Then we're going to go down to bookdown. And I'm going to call this first bookdown. Okay. So then it'll take a second and load a whole lot of information. So now will create just a very minimal example book. Again, this is a basic README, basic information about the files, how it's going to output information, and then what is essentially the home page. So allows you to edit it itself. So let's say instead, let's actually make the book first, and then I'll show you all how to edit it. So you'll notice over here that there is all these different files, like there's an intro, lit, methods, all these different things. So what we're going to do is we're going to make all of this by using bookdown serve book. So now in bookdown language, serve book just means we're going to build it, and it's going to make a nice little website for us so that we can see where all these different pieces are. And so the guy that makes it is just so helpful. He made a lot of these different packages for using Markdown in R. So again, you can just add math, text in here as well, and references, which is extremely useful, along with different pages and all this other stuff, which is so useful. So now if we want to add like a chapter, let's say we want to add a chapter like after summary. Let's just take the summary one and copy it. So we're going to name this 06 cool stuff. So now because we did that, we're going to now rename the references. So instead of 6, it's going to be, let's just go ahead and make it 99 so that it is the last one. Okay, so you'll notice that it was already doing all these different pieces and like refreshing over here. And that's something that bookdown will do automatically because it has that serve site function. So that means it's automatically editing the book while you're using it. So if we refresh this, why is it not? Okay, so we want to, let's see what it does. Oh, it opened up in a new tab. Oh, there it is. See, it made us a new one, another chapter here, because it's just a copy of chapter 6. Yeah, there it is. There it updated. And it will sometimes host it locally on your computer through like Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge or whatever you're using. And so it's a really powerful way of making organization of notes and things and longer documents and split it up very easily. And so you can just go into each of the chapters and edit it as you want, which is very nice. I like it because it really allows you to make longer R scripts, but not make them like tedious to read, and still have it organized very linearly. Okay, so that's an example. So what I have is I actually have a Bookdown project where I was making like a analysis companion guide for a book called Bayesian Psychometric Modeling. So what I did with Grant's help is we were working through how to do all the analyses in this book using all the R code and some different types of packages as well, so that we could have a reference on how to do these things later down the road. And so it allows us to kind of break things up and keep different figures and analyses together. So like here's a very simple analysis using Stan, but it's all kept together in R along with the accompanying information with it, so that we now have a reference on how to do this in Stan freely available online for us to go back to. So now it allows us to actually get to some really more complicated models where we have to kind of think about the analysis in a bit more detail, where there's so many different ways of doing it. So like in looking at like the DAG, it seems crazy and complicated, but once we move into the actual code, it doesn't feel as bad because it's all right there together without having to flip back and forth between different books and references that might not be freely available for us. So that's the power of Bookdown, and it's something I'm currently using to make my notes for a stats class I'm teaching this semester. It's a way of making them all organized in one spot for me so that I can actually go back to it later. And the nice part is that there's actually a lot of currently available books that you can do. So like if we go to Bookdown, so this is where a lot of these texts are stored, because they actually have a free hosting option for these texts, so that we can keep it together so they can have it openly available for others to use. Like there's a whole book on using Bookdown, again by the guy who just does everything. It's so great. And so this is a great resource for how to do it and how to basically troubleshoot some issues that you might run into. So like different types of tips and different types of hosting options and how to customize different pieces of it. So one of the nice parts is it gives you options on how to publish it online for free. So like there's RStudio Connect, which is what I briefly showed in R previously, where it's do this publish piece, publish it through HTML, and it will basically RStudio Connect or RPubs. And then there's also through GitHub, which is what I do, because it's free and keeps a lot of the other projects I have together nicely. And then there's other options as well. And then there's so many other just useful pieces of information there. So the nice part is there's kind of a book for like everyone on here. There's more that are more statistical, some that are more data science-y. Then there's some that are just about visualization, which is really powerful, and different types of programming and packages, and so many powerful tools as well. So one of the examples I wanted to show you of is this one. It's completely separate from all the other ones that I've shown you so far, because it is just some people at a very nice introduction to some of the psychometric information that we do. They have it split up to where each chapter is its own page, where it's just a long chapter page-wise. See, the previous one that I had, it had it more broken up a little bit more. And you can do it however you see fit, which is always great to have so many options on how to do these things. And because it's HTML, you can make it as wide as you want it to, and there's no restrictions on that, which is great. So you're not confined to that 7 by 11 page restriction. But again, this just Bookdown itself is just so helpful for how to do these things and options for basically storing and organizing your information. Like if we wanted to Bookdown so there's a whole repository of texts for statistics under the tag, and so you can just search in here, and like you could go in, grab one, take the source material, and actually just edit it yourself. So like if I wanted to, I could take, say, let's do this one. So I can actually go into the source code if he has it set up like that. Nah, maybe not. I'm pretty sure they do. I know there's a way to get to there. It is. Yeah, so you can actually get to the source code, which is great. So if you want to like copy information from them, I mean, probably should ask them, but you're probably more than welcome to just go into their code and look at it as well, which is great. And so that is some of the power of using Markdown, is you can have all this organization and structure around your documents so that you can use it for other people to have free access to it. So I just wanted to thank you all for taking your time to listen to this presentation. I really am hoping that other people can find this stuff as interesting as I do, and will maybe find some uses for it. Have a great day, everyone.